Okay, welcome everyone. Dr. Summer Nicole here of SOMA, Women's Collective for Mind Body Healing. Super excited to bring you guys Deborah Wilder. She is, I keep describing you actually to my friends as a fairy godmother. She is a codependency therapist of over 47 years. And my husband and I are both seeing her right now individually. And it's just really made a world of a difference as we've been kind of unraveling years and years of being in a codependent relationship. And she's been so helpful. And I see so many things in all my other relationships and even in my friends and what they go through from the wisdom that she shares with me. And I just feel like I just want to just share her with as many people as possible. So Deborah, I'd love for you to just maybe give us a little, a sum up of kind of how you made it in that seat for over 47 years now.
Well, thank you, Summer. It's not the first time I've been called a fairy godmother. I have that little something around me.
You do.
I like that. I like that the magic is alive. It's been, primarily my own journey. I was always interested in figuring out why my family was so messed up, so I became a psychologist. That's why most people become psychologists, right? And then I had my own relationship journeys, first with the man that I grew up with and was in high school with, and then the second marriage was for 28 years. That was a very long growth curve. And that's where I learned about codependency. And now I am reunited with one of my best friends in my 20s. And we've been together now almost 10 years. And it's a totally different experience. And I feel so blessed that whatever it took for my awakening is now in the harvest of sharing with your generation. And I'm just so happy and grateful that you're precocious enough and committed enough and willing to really help us all lift this training that is generations and generations of denying the self. And we're going to create a whole different world as we come into really honoring the self. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure. And I look forward to the day when I'm in the harvest mode and not in the emerging from the gnarly codependent relationship, because it has been exactly like what you said, really hard, really messy, disorienting. It's so challenging. There's so much we could talk about here, but let's just start with your definition of codependence.
My definition is that when there's any choice to be made, when my first thought is about somebody else or what they need or how it might be received or what might happen if I chose thus and so, that's codependency. When I deny myself direct access to what's my desire, what's my heart, what's my instinct, what's my guidance that's already alive in here. That's what I call codependency. It's looking out there to find out how I'm doing rather than sourcing the great pleasure of being myself.
Sourcing our own inner wisdom. That's always there and available, but sometimes the stories just, the projections of the little child, inner wounded little child, just want to just take us for a ride. And yeah, I feel like well, I'm going to save that. There's like so many things I want to share. But I feel like I'm curious if I ask you the question of, is there such thing as a not codependent adult? As an independent adult? Like, I guess the question is like, is it possible to like raise a child to become an adult that's not codependent?
Yeah, if they were born in the last 10 or 12 years.
You said if they were born in the last 10 or 12 years?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is an evolutionary experience that we're having, because part of the reason that we're codependent is because of what I used to call good woman training, but it's just as evident for men that the role-based relationship that comes from the tribal need to keep a cultural experience alive, that's our identity, is what the tribe values. I'm from this tribe and this is how we do it. That necessitates that men know what men are supposed to do and women know what women are supposed to do. And it's that good woman training and that good man training that keeps us repeating generation after generation after generation. This denial of the brilliance and the genius and the creative spark that we come in with, because we pat ourselves into a role and then we lose who we are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious if you would be able to explain, remember how you explained to me, like pretty much you're saying most relationships end up here, right? And then can you just sort of do that little analogy that you did for me? It was really helpful.
Yeah, I find that having a visual really gives our body a chance to participate in the learning. And that's so crucial because our whole system is geared toward visual learning, and we need to have experiential learning. So here it is. We are attracted to someone who is resonating with us in where we're resonating. We are all frequencies, right? So if the state of my consciousness draws someone else in a similar state of consciousness, we bring both our awareness and our awakeness and also our unconscious into relationship. And so we meet someone and we think, oh, this feels familiar. Oh, this person really gets me. Oh, I'm home. Oh, this is the place I've been looking for, which is all true, except that the closer and closer we get, the more our unconscious engages. And we pretty soon find ourselves in the sticky confusion of, how come what was so great doesn't feel so great anymore?
And you described it as collapse.
It is. It's a collapse into what we think we want as merging. I just want somebody that I feel so at home with that I don't have to actually think about my life anymore. They're just going to make everything okay. Yeah, that's the child's expectation. So it's in that collapsing into the fantasy, into the fairy tale that we've been trained in, that we find ourselves then in this very sticky, tension-filled experience. Usually takes a few years to realize, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know what I want. I'm confused a lot. I don't feel great and juicy and sexy and wonderful anymore. I just feel lost. And that's the codependency that you're trying to escape. And so the more you pull out of that way of relating, that role-based, I better not rock the boat kind of relating, the more you're in fear of actually finding out who you are, the longer the stickiness is. But when you begin to find it intolerable, usually we're not motivated by our courage, we're motivated by our pain. When you find it intolerable, then you begin to pull apart. And the person who begins the exploration of your upright, divine identity, your resource being beyond you, your understanding that you are always held and always loved because you are here. Then, as I explained to you, the person who really comes into that spiritual maturity of recognizing my life is my responsibility. The way I treat myself, the way I create my happiness is my responsibility. The more I can allow myself to consider that this other person is 100% responsible for their life as well. And they either take that idea and begin to awaken to, or sometimes it's just too much and they have to move off and find another place to engage on the horizontal. But let's say they get interested and they begin to find their own exploration. Oh, I don't have to take care of her all the time. I don't have to always think about, is she going to be mad at me? I don't have to resource my experience from the other person's experience. Then this period of uprightness stabilizes both people in their sovereignty. This is the messy part, the scary part. But once it's stabilized and you really trust yourself, then you have infinite possibilities of how to dance together. And it once again feels magical because you're now depending on love to hold you, not the other person.
It's huge. It feels like it's just massive and so common. Like you just see it. Now that we've talked about it, like, and I'm working with you, I'm like, I just see it everywhere, and can see how easily, how it came to me and, from my childhood and everything. And I'm curious because so for me, it was like stepping out of this codependency that almost like allowing my husband to be my caregiver. Is that the main dynamic you would say, or most common one that you see, or are there also other dynamics like roles or that people can take?
Well, there's all kinds of things. There's the orphan who needs to be rescued. There's the mothering that's smothering. There's the expectation that I'll be strong and you'll be weak. There's just every iteration you can imagine, because our entire culture is built on this codependent idea that I must be okay with what's out there, with how I'm being seen, how I'm being received, in order to be okay in here. And it's the outer referenced reality. I mean, that's what we build corporations on. People sit at desks for their whole lives, being fearful that they're not quite measuring up, and that's what keeps them forgetting the brilliance that they came in with.
And also, go ahead.
Every level of our society is touched with this codependent pattern, which then results mostly in addiction to escape the feeling of this just doesn't feel good, and to avoid taking responsibility for my life, which nobody tells us that actually growing up is a lot of fun. That actually taking responsibility for our own life is really a fun thing to do.
Will you repeat that, Deborah? It broke up just a little bit. Just that last piece, that last sentence.
I said, no one tells us that growing up can be the most fun thing to do, to take responsibility for myself can actually liberate me to play more, to bring my gifts more, to enjoy myself more.
Yes, and the whole like outer referencing piece you're speaking about, it's like I feel like a big piece of it is also like what you just were speaking of, which is the fairy tale that we've been fed of, like the happily ever after, and this one person's going to be able to meet all your needs, and like all of this, and that for me has been a real part of like the grieving, and yeah, unraveling this has been just almost like letting go of this dream that we were fed, that it's going to look like this and then this and then this and then you're going to be happily ever after and you're good. That I feel like it's a real collapse of a reality is how I've been describing it, and which is I guess why it can feel so disorienting, because for me it's felt like in one hand a collapse of reality, and then the other hand a total reclamation of myself and my power, my sovereignty. So it feels like both things.
Absolutely. You think about it, it's the fantasy that creates the suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, I don't know about you, but part of what's happening in my own awakening is the entire context of where I thought I was living in this country, and what this country was about, and what's happening in the world, and just about everything I believed is not true. And so the entire context that has been holding our reality is collapsed.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're really being called to go instinctual.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what is my core essence that already knows how to honor the planet, and knows how joyful I feel when I see the sunset, or I am in the field with the flowers, or, you know, I know my relationship to nature.
Mm-hmm.
And in that awakening that piece, then I can trust that my instincts to know how to navigate here on the planet can hold me steady as I learn how to interact with another who's just as fragile and just as lost and just as also in wonder as the child who's waking up to, gosh, nothing was what they told me it was.
Right. Yeah. And it's almost like a necessity as the reality around us collapses, that because it's like we're used to sourcing from this sort of horizontal plane of outside of ourselves, to as all of that collapses, of just being like, well, actually the only thing is like for me to connect to source of my truth and my heart, which is ultimately love, and what can I provide myself that I'm really seeking from the other person.
Yeah. We've just been fed the idea that love is something you can get.
Right.
That's what all the fairy tales are like.
Yeah, exactly.
But love is nothing you can get. Love is who you are.
And you already have it. Yeah. And a big piece for me recently has been, what are the qualities of the divine masculine that you want to receive, from another? And then how can you access it? How can you access that yourself? And I've been in that inquiry for the last 72 hours or so, pretty strong, of well, what is it that I'm seeking? And when I first tune into it, it's well, I want presence, and I want them to be unfazed by my little girl, and affectionate and loving. And I'm like, okay, now going inside
now
my own
my
divine
own divine mask.
and
And
how can I do myself?
How can I be present in support of that vulnerability, that little girl?
Yeah.
And how can I be loving and accepting?
Mm-hmm.
All of that is totally accessible to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's actually the appropriate relationship with the masculine that you do lead with your feminine, intuitive, not knowing discovering, being in the moment, present, and have the masculine support that to hold sovereignty and protection and honor and respect for that deep knowing that you carry in the feminine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then there's something I'm going to try to get you to say it so it comes from your words, but it's just been so helpful for me. What would you say to people who are kind of unraveling this codependency within themselves, and it's really common for their wounded inner child to, have a thought that creates a story that projects their fears and worries into the future? How does one handle that the best?
Well, the anxiety and the fear and the worry, those are always future oriented. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the best things is to come back to the body, put your hands on your tummy and on your heart, and just remind yourself, I'm here. I'm right here. I'm right here, right now. Mm-hmm. And that can begin to invite some presence and some comfort out of the scary stories that are way ahead in the future. Mm-hmm. That probably will never happen the way you imagine them anyway. Mm-hmm. Anybody who's lived long enough knows that all of that is just self-created suffering. Mm-hmm. But it still comes because the fear is, I'm not enough, or I don't know enough, or I need something. And coming back here to find out what I need really allows me to then meet that need. And if it's hard, if you say, I don't know what I need, I always like to just ask, complete this sentence as quick as it comes to you. I wish. What's the first thing you wish for? Mm-hmm. That's what you need. Mm. This morning I was working with someone and she said, I wish I was free. So that's the inquiry. What would it feel like to be free? What do I need to let go of right now to feel free? Mm-hmm. How am I not letting myself be free? Mm-hmm. So if it feels like you can't access what I need, start with I wish.
I love that. And it's really helped me, the analogy, I shared this with you the other day, I think in our session, the analogy of like, can you be so mindful and present that before it goes into a whole story that the wounded little child wants to take you into, can you catch like the first thought that is fearful or anxious or, projecting into the future? Can you catch her first thought? And I literally have this like vision when because I keep doing it during the day. I just literally catch my little girl by the arm and like, no, like come back here, right into my heart. And we're right here and we're right now. And how are you feeling and what do you need? And then give her that.
Beautiful.
And many times a day, like sometimes I have to do it,
It's very simple.
Mm-hmm.
It's very doable. Mm-hmm. And it's very healing. Mm-hmm. That child is not trying to create suffering for you. That child has waited patiently for years and years for you to pay attention to her and to really make her the priority. And she's so grateful and happy to have that call back to your heart.
Because she really runs the show in some ways whenever we don't give her what she's asking for, which oftentimes is just attention or presence or love or holding, right? Like she will, I've had that play out a lot of times in my life where she's just running the show. And like, a lot of times it was unconscious to me that that's what was happening at the time.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, I feel like what you said, like it's it does feel like an evolutionary step forward for humanity, because even in our fairy tales and movies, and it's all written this, even in songs, like it's all codependent, like what we're literally fed and brainwashed, like so yeah, it does feel like a huge part of our evolution. And man, it's not easy to unwind, like just it is hard and messy and yeah, disorienting, like you said, and all those things. And it's and it feels really important at the same time. It's like, because just knowing, okay, and for anybody watching too, if you just know you're in a relationship of this just actually isn't sustainable, like this dynamic, I love this person so much, but the dynamic, something's off with the dynamic, and you just have this hunch that it's not sustainable. And that's kind of where like where my husband and I came, where like so much love there, and then just something's off and not knowing exactly what to do with it. So it's been so helpful as we kind of take space and unravel it, meeting with you and you being this like accurate mirror of like what is actually happening in real time. It's been so helpful. Yeah. And I have like a list of questions that some people have for you. So
Okay.
if it's okay with you, I'll just start firing them off. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Okay, and you may have covered some of this already, but I just might get a different answer asking it this way. What does it take for two people who have been in a codependent relationship for years become two sovereign beings and meet each other as new?
It takes willingness. It takes forgiveness. It takes genuine interest.
In yourself and in the other person?
Yeah. I always say you need two things to make a successful relationship. One is that you know that you're committed to growing together and separately, and that you're willing.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that you're growing is not enough. You have to be willing to let the unknown show itself and take the journey.
Mm-hmm.
And
Also, go ahead.
let the unknown become your friend, because where is all potential? Where is infinite intelligence? It's all waiting to be revealed.
Yeah, and there's a certain amount of like you have to like not be attached like to the outcome, which is really hard whenever it's unknown, and because you really don't know what's going to be on the other side of standing up and being sovereign after years and years of being codependent, and then meeting each other as new, and then, well, how do we relate to each other now? If you're no longer my caregiver and I'm no longer codependent on you, it's like, how do you relate to each other now? And how does it, yeah, it's almost like a test that I've putting my marriage through right now, which is just, let's see what happens if we both commit to this newfound sovereignty and integrate this newfound sovereignty, meet back together as new, and like almost just wanting to see like what kind of authentic desire arises within you for me in that space. And it's risky, it's risky. You just don't really know like what's going to happen on the other side. I feel like there's like a certain level of, you have to let go. It's easier said than done, but just letting go and like trusting that, somebody said to me the other day, trusting that it's all being handled. It's all like from a divine perspective, it's already handled. And that like gives me a piece of relief, I feel like.
Yeah. Well, I think there are a couple of principles that are easy to work with. One is that nothing comes into experience uninvited. So you've invited this exploration. Mm-hmm. Can you stay fascinated? Mm-hmm. Can you be curious? Can you relax enough to be in your innocence, so that as you learn to trust yourself and you come back into meeting with the familiar one, that you're awake enough to get to know who they are now, to reveal yourself in who you are now.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not the same person who left for that space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it is risky, and everything new includes risk, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there are no guarantees in life.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing we know is that we have our hearts and we have ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
and our desires will guide us into our destiny.
Mm-hmm.
So what if coming back together in the fascination and getting to know each other, something's revealed that both of you suddenly see that there's something much greater that's calling you than this relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Then even if there's a redefinition of what this relationship is, it's discovered in the joy of the expansion.
Mm-hmm.
It's not I want and you want, and that's in opposition. It's I want and you want, and let's see what is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always liberating no matter what the outcome.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's such a big piece of, you describe it as like how we abandon ourselves or how we like leave ourselves in relationship, and maybe you could speak a little bit to like what that might look like. It's maybe someone's ever heard that term of like how I might abandon myself in relationship. Maybe speaking to that a little bit would be awesome. And then the other piece I just don't want to forget to say is the self-forgiveness piece has been massive, because when you told me, because I was having waves of grief come up, and just being really available and to feel those and let them move through. And you shared with me, well, you have to remember that's actually backed up grief from all of the times you've abandoned yourself in this relationship. And I was like, oh, just like really like sitting with that and being with that. So I feel like the self-forgiveness piece, oftentimes we project like we need to be able to forgive this other person, but the self-forgiveness piece is so big. So I don't know if you could, kind of two things in one, if you could speak to.
Well, it's really in the little things. It's in the moment to moment things. It's not speaking up when there's something really wanting to be said, or there's fear of sharing my vulnerable feeling about this, or I just have to contain myself in some way so as I don't upset you. There's all that ways that we're denying our own truth. And it can be as simple as I worked with a woman once who said, I've now been to countless race car experiences, and I really don't like them, any of them. Those kinds of awarenesses of why am I doing this? That question, when you ask yourself, how did I get here? Then there's codependency happening, because your sovereign self and your beloved sovereign self wants you to do what makes you happy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's that whole piece. And the forgiveness piece, well, I actually think from the time we enter our school system, and in some families way before that, we're taught, no, we don't feel that way. No, we don't act that way. No, you have to make sure that Jimmy has what he needs. And it's so pervasive that I was having a conversation earlier with someone about, he said, I don't really know what it would be like to be a good parent. I said, are you interested in who this little being is? This is just another you in a smaller body. And so, are you interested in getting to know them? They have their own amazing genius and giftedness and way of seeing the world? Are you more interested in getting to know them? Or are you interested in teaching them how to be you? And that's what we mostly get. Or even, I need you to be better than me. I need to live my unlived life through your doing what I was never able to do. Just so much lack of presence in parenting because fear is driving the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
I have to do this parenting thing so that you will be safe when you're not in my view.
Mm-hmm.
And from that fear, I don't actually get interested in what kind of instincts do you have? What do you know about being safe?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a complex cultural phenomena that we're unwinding here.
Mm-hmm. Cute.
We're just remembering who we are.
Right.
You know, it's part of the hero's journey to come through all of these impositions on our sovereignty and to discover who we are. You can't really avoid that journey no matter what culture you're born in.
Mm-hmm.
But in ours in particular, there's a lot of mental suffering trying to get the outside world to match the fantasy picture that we've been fed.
Mm-hmm. And you, the way you work, so people know, is that you work with people individually, and then when you see them here contained and self-regulated, then they can come in with their partner, and then you'll see the partners together, right? Like, so I just, yeah, that feels important, because I've heard you say therapy is not mediation, and like basically you need to be able to hold that other person's perspective without getting triggered or reacting from a trigger, I should say.
Well, you can't avoid being triggered because that's unwinding the old patterns.
Right.
But at least you can have a place to land that you can rely on.
Uh-huh.
You know? So, occasionally I'll see a couple together first just to give them give them the groundwork of what's to be expected in this journey.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that's useful because they're coming from such different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
But when people are fairly engaged in their own work and they have a certain grounding in personal inquiry, then I find it's much quicker to work individually and then come together.
Yeah, I could definitely see that now. So let's see. Oh, I know. I have some questions I can't forget to ask you. Let me just start with, and some of these are loaded, and if any of them feel too big for like the context of this conversation, you're welcome to just say that, but I'm just going to read you the questions as they were written to me. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, one is asking about disorganized attachment style, which is actually like the next, I'm doing a different expert interview on attachment styles because that's like its whole thing, right? But you're welcome to speak on it. But she's asking about disorganized attachment style and how or whether it relates to codependency and how to level up self-help techniques to break the cycle and heal and develop healthy, intimate relationships.
Well, I can bear witness to every attachment style has codependent potential in it. So I'm not an attachment expert, but I have worked with avoidant people and anxious and all the various different kinds of attachment. And fundamentally, the question has the answer in it. Self-care is the foundation of being able to regulate in any situation. Yeah? So being able to return to the self, take care of the physical needs, take care of how to self-soothe, being able to be aware, like you learning to be aware of when you start moving into the projection or the dissociation, just being able to be attentive enough to the self, that's self-care. So I have kind of a generalized answer to that, that if you aren't practicing self-care, then unwinding codependency is really several steps down the road.
I can see that. Yeah. And when you say self-regulation, would you describe that as the same? I mean, it is a form of self-care for sure, but because both people need to be contained and self-regulated, can you speak to that piece a little bit?
Yeah. Well, part of the reason that this collapse happens, is because we're not familiar enough with our own needs, our own awareness, or our boundaries. You know, codependency is basically an unboundaried relationship, right? So being able to know where I end and you begin is essential to being able to meet, right? So when I talk about regulation, I'm basically talking about when you feel upset, when you're in the story, when you're in despair, can you come home to the little one who's actually trying to get your attention? Your nervous system will not calm down until you are here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So adding the awareness that I am comforting my little girl, and she's only 4, and she doesn't really understand why she's upset. That's why I often use the example of, if you were to hear a knock on the door when you're really upset, you were open that door and meet that little one, would you know what to do?
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead.
Mostly we do know what to do. We're just not doing it.
We're just not doing it. Yeah, because there's a big difference. Because when somebody told me that somebody with an anxious tendency, an anxious attachment style, their job to learn how to be secure is to self-regulate. When I first heard that, I was like, but I have lots of alone time. Like, I like being by myself. Like, I was like, fought it a little bit. And then I was like, when I realized like they're talking about actually going in and accessing and communicating with the little girl in that moment in a way that is authentic and compassionate and almost like evolved enough to bring some form of relief. Because what I found when I started to do that was, there's actually like ways that I would try to parent her that I saw in my primary caregivers, which was like being frustrated or annoyed or impatient. And so like really recognizing like, I need to reach here for some sort of evolved way of parenting that I wasn't even shown. And it takes some work, I think, to find the authentic words, like to be able to communicate with her, because she won't come down if it's not authentic. So I found over and over again, it's not. And I asked you, because it was like a particular, like, just when anyone goes into like a trauma response, and like in those, a particular period when that was happening to me, and I was asking you like, what can I do to help calm like the limbic brain like that? Because sometimes for some of us, if the childhood trauma has just a certain level of intensity, and if it feels like life or death in your system, there's also some things you can do to help calm down the limbic brain. So I just could you see that just so people have that?
Of course. The limbic brain loves rhythmic movement. So that's rocking. You know, some people, when they're really upset, they just instinctually start to rock. So rocking is very soothing. If you have a rocking chair, you can do that quite consciously. Take yourself to the rocking chair when you're upset. Sometimes walking, being out in nature and really walking just to be walking not to be trying to sort anything out or solve anything, but just to feel the body walking. Yeah. Sometimes dance. Everything is body related because you're actually having a nervous system response. And so you must attend to the body. Sometimes getting in a hot bath will help after the rhythmic movement. Because rhythmic movement is the key thing that unlocks the limbic brain.
Mm-hmm. And you said, because I swim a lot, you said swimming is also really good because it's very good like that. Yeah, that's been really helpful just to know, just if I do go into that, you know, and I just really wanted to be able to share that with anyone else, that if you have a particular, your trauma response is so intense that it feels like life or death in your system and you're like literally like shaking. So helpful to come to those tools as you're doing, like, you know, still doing the inner child work and still doing the reparenting, but that was really helpful for me. So thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. We so live a life in our heads and our thoughts, and our body is where all the pleasure is. Mm-hmm. Our body is all the sensuous experience of being here and being alive. And that's all the little kid wants, is get back in my body.
Right. Yeah. And that's why I named this, my women's circles, SOMA, because it's like whatever we're doing, it always leads back to the body. You have to come back to the body to do whatever work you're trying to do on an emotional, spiritual, or mental level. You have to come back. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go to her next question. Okay. She says, how does a now adult child interact in a healthy way with a codependent parent? And then she's just asking to speak about how to set boundaries with an energy draining parent, and whether or not overtly setting boundaries is typically more or less effective than other methods.
The one that you're dealing with, the parent that is codependent, the one you're really speaking to in the parent is, of course, their unhealed child. So it just depends on the pattern that you're dealing with. Patience can help, but firm and clear boundaries, really important. I can listen to you for 10 minutes and then I have to go. Mm-hmm. That's still kind, that's still patient, that's still staying in connection, but it's setting a boundary. Depending on how that's received, sometimes I counsel a sabbatical is crucial to actually have any chance of breaking the codependency.
Did you say a sabbatical?
Sometimes we have to say, you know, this is just really too much for me. And as much as I love you, I really can't be present in this way. And so I'm going to take some time to be with myself to find out how I might return and be more loving. Yeah. So that might mean 2 weeks of no contact. That might mean 6 months of no contact. That might mean I'll be in touch when I feel like I'm ready to be with you again. And that's where the mantra of codependency is so helpful, because to set that kind of boundary with a parent is going to bring up every anxiety that your little kid has, not being loved, of being abandoned, you know? So here's the mantra with every person that you're trying to unhook with. I trust you to be 100% responsible for your own experience. I trust you to be 100% responsible for your own experience, which is actually a deep acknowledgement and a reverence for their soul, to trust them. Mm-hmm. Whether it's your beloved or your parent or your friend or whoever is entangled in this pattern that is stealing the life force from both of you.
Yeah, it takes definitely a certain amount of just letting go and of control, because you don't have control over the other person ever.
Or any place or circumstance or thing outside of you.
Right.
You do not have control.
Right. Yeah.
In the world that we're in right now, we have the good fortune of being faced with evidence of that moment to moment. It's always been true. We've never had control. But right now, we're really facing letting go of that illusion. We don't have control. We don't know what's next. We don't know how things are going to look 6 months from now. What we know is that we're here.
And this is how I can take care of myself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you ready for the next one?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. It says, how/at what level a now adult child of a codependent parent who covertly adopts a victim position with other family members can have on healthy relationships and maintain a healthy emotional state with those other family members who believe the victim and regularly suggest the now adult child be a better child when really that adult child is just observing the boundaries that they have set.
I got a little lost in there.
I did too.
We're talking about, or one person?
I know, I did too. So I'm like, oh, I hope she gets it. Okay, so she's talking about, this is a woman who's an adult, but she's talking about, she's talking about herself. She has a codependent parent who, who covertly adopts a victim position with her family members. Got it?
I got it. Okay. So the victim position is the most powerful position in the family because it enrolls everybody's attention, right? The family is destabilized when the victim is activated, and the family will do anything to get back to, are we all okay? So the victim sits in the seat of power. Now, if we don't give the victim that power, and we give them instead reflection or inquiry or what do you want to do about that, or whatever they're complaining about or telling us their woeful story about, we just have to be able to tolerate their discomfort and not being rescued.
Not jump into the rescuer or the helper.
Right. And so, it will play out all three positions: persecutor, victim, and rescuer. Now, it'll all play out, but if you stay steady in your own containment of, I am a beneficial presence, my only contribution is my presence, I have the discernment to know when to move closer and when to move away, then everyone has an opportunity to kind of come into their own awareness. And it's super chaotic and messy while that's happening. But there's nothing to be done except to stay present. It takes a tremendous amount of grounding and self-trust and a lot of self-care. And you just don't put yourself in that situation daily. You limit your contact, but you're consistent in not trying to influence anything, to just be in curiosity. How would you like to do that? What would that be like for you? Whatever. And if the person won't engage with you because they need to have the sad song sung, then you just have to say, as I used to say sometimes to my mother, I'm pretty sure you're right about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And leave it at that. There's nothing to be done about it. I'm pretty sure you're right about that. Which is still a beneficial presence kind of statement without engaging in the dynamic.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm going to keep moving here because I want to honor your time, and I know there's a couple more I want to get through. I feel like we've touched on this, but tell me if there's anything else you'd want to add to this. Tools or techniques for staying grounded and present when feeling triggered in close relationships, for example, with a friend or family member, when folks are carrying around their own trauma.
Well, try to remember you always have the right for a pause. Let me think about that. I think I'm going to step outside and walk around the block. I'll be back in a few minutes. Or, I'm feeling really fatigued right now. I think I'm going to go take a bath. Give yourself a pause. Give yourself space. Come into relationship with yourself. And it often necessitates moving your body out of proximity to where the scene is happening. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So feel comfortable taking space. Mm-hmm. Just because you need to. Mm-hmm. You don't owe anyone an explanation for taking care of yourself.
That's big right there. You don't know anybody anything or any explanation for having to take care of yourself. Yeah, I've gotten really good at saying, I'm going to sleep on that just to give myself time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, those are all good.
Action. Yeah.
Yeah. I really hear you. I need to think about that.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Perfect. Okay, next one. How traumatized, wonderful people work through the effects of trauma and subsequent attachment issues without alienating each other when none or neither is fully equipped to guide the communication, reconciliation / moving forward process.
Well, that sounds like localizing the guidance in the other person or in you. Mm-hmm. And the only guidance that there is guidance of how to stay with yourself. So, what I find when people get back together after having done a little bit of self-inquiry is the fear of being revealed, the fear of being seen, in the vulnerability of how very much I care about this and how scared I am that I don't know what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's just human. Mm-hmm. We don't know. Mm-hmm. We fear being seen when it's the thing we long for the most. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think a mirror practice helps a lot with this, to just get grounded in that I don't have the answers of how to guide this reunion. I don't know what's going to happen. And I'm willing to be here, to be present, to find out. Mm-hmm. So when you can spend time in front of the mirror and really receive who's looking back at you and find compassion and love and forgiveness and presence with that one, that's good practice. Mm-hmm. For coming into the reunion with the beloved.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, I think there's two more. Thank you for that. That was beautiful, and hope you guys can all see the, what's it called? The commonality here, like in the answers: self-care, containment and self-regulation. It's like, really, it just comes back to that over and over again. I hear you say it in different ways, but it's like, that's ultimately what it comes down to.
We don't want to miss the direct experience of being who I am.
What was the first part of that sentence?
We don't want to miss the direct experience of being who I am.
Mm.
And so that's why I have to be in my body. That's why I have to be here now.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is the direct experience. I'm sitting with Summer right now. This is my life experience right now. And it's rich, and it's precious, and it's awake, and it's right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why these self-care practices and all of the return. Jennifer Barrison has a beautiful CD if you've never heard it. It's called Returning.
Mm.
And it's just a long form chant that lasts over an hour. It's just returning to the mother of us all.
Mm. Oh yeah, I love that. Yeah. Yeah, returning to the present moment, returning to the body, right? Yeah.
This is where nurturance lives.
Right. That's where we're going to find nourishment. Yeah. Yes. And then I think there's two more questions. I have one more that says, how can siblings heal together, in particular when one of the siblings does not really seem to be aware of the trauma or the dysfunction?
The tricky thing about siblings is we think because we grew up in the same family that we had the same experience.
No.
Not so. So the one who doesn't seem to be aware of the trauma, etc., we don't know what their experience was. Maybe their soul contract was to just take it all lightly and they're perfectly fine and happy the way they are. We can't project our experience on our siblings just because we grew up in the same household.
Just taking that one in for myself right now. Yeah.
We have to know that we're present to get to know who this person is. You know, we can't assume we know what they're about and what they're here for.
Mm-hmm. So asking questions.
Right.
That's good. A good place to start. What was your experience? What was this like for you?
Yeah, you'd be shocked at how different it is.
Oh, this will be a fun one for me. Mm-hmm. Okay.
My siblings and I just get hysterical sharing this kind of perspective with each other.
Well, I think this is actually a really good question to end on. One that my friend is asking, what qualities does a mature woman in her power have, hold, and can share?
Well, my beloved and I developed 3 principles that we live by, and I think they help me hold the essence of who I am. The first one is relaxation is the key. If I'm not relaxed, I'm really not in touch with who I am. Yeah. So relaxing will help you presence what's real for you. Curiosity is the cure. So I can either be anxious or regretful or projecting my stories. But actually, if I can just get curious, most everything that's troubling me can show itself, and it's a gift for me. Yeah. So curiosity is the cure. And everything is a reason to open your heart. Everything.
Everything is a reason to open your heart.
Everything.
Hmm.
That last fight you had, that tragedy that you just witnessed, that success that your child just had, that bird that just landed on the railing, that beautiful meal that you just prepared. Everything is a reason to open your heart, because that's what the power of a woman is.
Hmm.
And our world so needs more heart.
Hmm. Oh, thank you so much for your time. This is the longest interview we've had so far, and because I feel like I could just keep talking to you for hours and hours, but I'll put a boundary and honor you. Thank you so, so much. I just am so happy to share your wisdom and insights with people. They've just been just such a game changer and just really so supportive to me. And but before we end, actually, would you like to share about what your creation?
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
I went to a birthday party, and the people who were there, young people, 30-year-olds, were asked to share with the birthday girl something they wanted to say before we cut the cake. And absolutely no one spoke up. And my heart was just broken for her. And so I spoke up and really appreciated this amazing being that she is and what she does in the world to bring children into nature. And I thought that would just be an opening for everyone to join in and appreciate her. And still no one said a word. So she very graciously said, okay, let's cut the cake. And the moment passed, and the awkwardness was quickly denied. And I went home from that, and I thought, there is something missing in our text-friendly world where we are not used to looking in each other's eyes and actually speaking appreciation to each other now. And so I wanted to do something about that. And I went home and I let my little girl play with Crayolas and different flower images. And I just had a good time doing, scribbles that are fun. And I wrote a long list of things that we might say to each other. I see your power, Summer, when you initiate sharing your deep journey with others. I respect your truth when I see your willingness to show me that you don't know sometimes, and that your truth is revealed in your curiosity. Your vision for your life amazes me when I get to witness you bringing this wisdom that you hold in your body to other women. Your generosity touches me when you invited me to share myself with you today.
You're just filling in the blank, right? Like, so that the people are clear. You have kind of...
Your generosity touches me when you...
Yes, and you're just filling it in. Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful.
And so holding this little card in front of me when I'm talking to you somehow is the magic bridge that allows me to tell you something direct. And I took these to subsequent potlucks and birthday parties and things. And even when there isn't one specific person that everyone is giving birthday wishes to or something, if everyone just draws a card and speaks to the person next to them or speaks to someone across the circle or who they feel called to speak to, I call this share your heart cards. And I wish there was a deck on every family table, that this was done at every meal, to just help us be comfortable in speaking love language from our hearts. So I have this little 28 card deck, and I have 2 other decks. One is for parents who want to learn to listen to their children, and one is for the harvest places, and can even be used at hospice and places where we need to speak directly to one another in this great miracle of life.
Such a beautiful offering, Deborah. I'm so happy. I really want to help you share this with so many people, because I've seen that, so many times. Yes, it feels like a real need. And tell people how they can find you.
They can go to deborahwilder.com, which is my website. And the cards are being listed there next week. My web person is on it right now. And in the meantime, I have 3 very short audio meditations that you can access to just come home to yourself. So you can find those on deborahwilder.com.
Beautiful. And if they want the cards, or to order the cards, then they can just, they'll find that information on your site to be on your list for when they're ready.
Yeah, and in the meantime, if they want to check it out now, they can just send me a request through the request a consultation. And you can send it to me that way if you want to not keep it in your mind for a week.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you
All right.
so much for your time and your wisdom, Deborah. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
So much love, Summer. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Blessings.
Aloha.
Aloha.